I had just moved into my new apartment 3 months ago. I thought it would be a good place to find peace after my breakup. I was 34, new to this small town, and ready for some solitude. My job as a data analyst kept me busy, but I needed quiet. The place looked old, with damp walls and flickering hallway lights, but it felt right. Then it started to rain. It was one of those dreary days where the sky never seemed to clear up. I remember lying in bed when I first heard the scratching noise. It seemed to come from the wall I shared with my neighbor. I figured it was just some animal stuck there. I tried to ignore it, but sleep slipped away. The scratching grew louder over the days. Then there were cries, faint and muffled. They came from the neighbor's apartment and sent chills down my spine. I kept telling myself it was all in my head. I wasn't crazy. I could feel my anxiety creeping in. I noticed my neighbor outside one day. They stood there, staring blankly at the ground. I didn't know how to reach out or if I even wanted to. Maybe it was better to let them be. I thought they just needed space. One night, while rain poured down, I found a note slipped under my door. My heart dropped as I read it. It only said, "Help them." Who did I need to help? I felt cold all over, but I dismissed it as my imagination running wild. The next night was worse. I heard laughter, children laughing coming from that wall. It wasn't possible. I froze in bed, unsure of my next move. I wanted to call someone, but who would listen? I imagined they'd think I was crazy. But the scratching, the cries, the note, and now laughter felt real. I felt trapped in my own mind that I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the wall. Each minute felt like an hour. My heart thumped loudly. The laughter echoed in my head. Then I heard a soft voice whispering through the wall. It said, "Help us." My skin crawled. I leaped up and rushed to the door, my heart racing. When I opened it, there was nothing. Just the rain pounding outside. I stepped into the hallway, still feeling the tremors of fear. I wanted to knock on my neighbor's door, but the door felt so heavy. I held my breath as I walked back to my room. I crawled into bed, but the scratching returned. My palms were sweaty. I wanted to drown out the noise with my thoughts, but it wouldn't fade. What was happening? Then I heard it again, the laughter, followed by the scratching. Something felt wrong. I pressed my ear against the wall, feeling breathless. Suddenly, silence. I still don't know what to think. Was it real? My mind was racing with questions. The scratching came back, persistent and eerie, and I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for sleep. I didn't know what was going on. I just lay there in the dark, feeling more alone than ever. The next day was heavy with gray clouds. I had planned to go for a walk to clear my head, but the rain kept me inside. I felt restless and trapped, like a ghost in my own life. The atmosphere in the apartment was suffocating. I tried to focus on work. Sitting at my desk, I was less productive than ever. The sounds from the wall were like a metronome, keeping time with my anxiety. I finally decided to confront it head-on. I would knock on my neighbor's door. I couldn't ignore the calls for help any longer. As I walked down the hallway, my nerves tightened. I hesitated at their door, feeling the chill in the air. I raised my hand but stopped short. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just an animal or a child in distress. Then I remembered the note, and I knocked firmly. Silenced. I waited, my heart pounding, unsure of what to do. I was about to knock again when I heard a whisper from inside. "Help us." It felt unreal, like the walls had eyes. I couldn't understand how the voice seemed so close, yet muffled, as if someone was pushing against the other side of the wall. I stepped back, unsure if I should run or stay. Before I could decide, the door creaked open slightly. I peered through the gap and saw nothing but darkness. "Hello?" I called, my voice shaky. "Is anyone there?" Still no response. Just darkness and an unsettling stillness. My instinct told me to turn and flee, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant to go inside. My breath hitched in my chest, and I pushed the door open wider. It was then that I noticed the smell. It was musty, sweet, almost like rotting fruit. That I took a step inside, the floor creaking beneath me. I scanned the dimly lit room, and that's when I saw it, a small toy, a ragged teddy bear, lying on the floor, soaked from the rain that dripped through the window. I crouched down to pick it up, feeling an odd pull towards it. That's when I heard it, a child's giggle. It echoed from the dark corners of the room. I dropped the bear as panic surged through me. I looked around, but there was no one there. The laughter rang out again, with a sense of playfulness that only made my fear worse. "Help us!" came the voice again, and it was louder now. It was urgent, desperate. My heart raced. I felt reality slipping away, as if I were descending into a trap. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind me. The sound boomed in the silence, and I felt the walls closing in. "Let me out!" I shouted, banging on the door. The laughter turned into cries, echoing through the darkness. Then, I heard it, the scratching. It was coming from all around me. I pressed my back against the door, my mind racing. I needed to escape this madness. I desperately jiggled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. That's when everything went dark. I stumbled back as the lights flickered and went out, plunging me into complete darkness. I could hear the scratching growing louder, and I braced myself against the door, paralyzed by fear. The silence felt thick, almost suffocating. In the pitch-black darkness, I strained my ears to make sense of the scratching. It was relentless, brushing against the walls like nails on a chalkboard. I could almost picture whatever it was, just a hair's breadth away from me, waiting to make its move. My heart raced as panic set in. I couldn't stand still any longer. I felt along the wall, my fingers trembling as they searched for something, anything that could help light the way or aid my escape. Just as I thought it might be hopeless, I remembered a small flashlight I always kept in my bag. I fumbled around until I located it, taking a deep breath to calm myself before turning it on. The beam flickered to life, cutting through the darkness in a weak glow. I pointed it toward the door, hoping to see something, anything that would assure me I wasn't completely alone. But the door remained as unyielding as ever. That's when I caught something odd. The scratching noise had stopped, there was an almost palpable stillness. I held my breath, just waiting. Then, in the silence, I heard a low voice, right behind me. "Play with us." I spun around, flashlight casting frantic shadows against the walls. I was alone, or so I thought. The voice sounded childish, innocent, but the darkness around me twisted that innocence. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, but I felt its presence all around me. "Who are you?" I shouted into the void, my voice trembling but bold. "What do you want?" There was no answer, just a soft giggle. It reverberated off the walls, chilling me to the bone. I turned back to the door, praying for it to magically open. Instead, the air grew heavier, almost choking me. It was then I noticed something moving in the far corner of the room. In the dim light, I saw a shifting shape. My breath caught. It was a figure, a small silhouette, too small to be an adult. It was hunched over, fiddling with something on the ground. I squinted harder, trying to make sense of it. "Come play." It beckoned again, its voice sweet but edged with something sinister. I took a step back, searching for a way out again. The scratching resumed suddenly, louder and more frantic. It was as if whatever was behind me was closing in. I felt the sweat bead on my forehead, and just as I turned to face the door again, something brushed against my ankle. My heart leaped into my throat. The flashlight slipped from my grasp and flickered out as it hit the ground. Darkness enveloped me, and I could hear a chorus of cries, no longer playful, but desperate and echoing through the void. My chest tightened with fear. I was trapped. Help us, they wailed, each voice intertwining with the next, creating a symphony of sorrow. I couldn't tell if it was a plea or a threat. I moved to the door again, bashing my fists against it in vain, shouting for anyone outside to hear me. But no one came. In that moment of despair, I remembered the tiny attic above this place. Maybe it was my only hope. I needed to find a way up there, to escape this torment. But as I turned to search for an exit, the whispers grew louder, wrapping around me like a veil. Stay with us. It was a demand, now a sinister invitation that chilled me to the core. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to get out, but that voice anchored me. Despite my instincts screaming for me to flee, I knew I had to know what was happening in this cursed apartment. I needed answers, even if it meant confronting the darkness head-on. I stumbled backward, cold sweat running down my back. In the pitch black, every whisper felt like a finger brushing my skin. The scratching resumed, moving around me like it was searching for something. I had to find a way out, and the attic was my only chance. Feeling along the wall, I searched for the door leading to the staircase. My fingers grazed over the uneven surface until I felt a latch. I pulled at it, but it was stuck. My breath came faster. It shouldn't be locked. With every ounce of fear fueling me, I yanked at it again. The door creaked open, and a wave of stale air hit me. Sprinting up the narrow stairs felt like an act of escape, the voices fading into the background like a distant storm. I reached the top, panting heavily. The attic door was slightly ajar, tempting me like a flickering candle in the dark. I pushed it open, the hinges groaning. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me as I stepped into the attic. Sparse light seeped from a cracked window, casting eerie shadows across dusty furniture and cobwebs. The room felt like it hadn't been occupied in years. The air was thick, and yet, a stillness clung to it, almost welcoming. I took a cautious step inside and nearly tripped over an old trunk. Curiosity overtook fear, and I knelt to open it. The lock gave way with a surprising ease, revealing an assortment of forgotten toys and children's books, their pages yellowed with age. But it was something else that caught my eye, an old, frayed doll, its button eyes staring blankly back at me. "Why did you come here?" A child's voice sang softly from the corner. I snapped my head around, heart racing again. I saw the small figure from before, now illuminated by the dim light. A girl, probably no older than 6, with tangled hair and a tattered dress, stood there, clutching a teddy bear that looked just as worn. "Did you bring us something?" she asked, her eyes wide with a strange mixture of hope and sadness. "What do you mean?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "Who are you?" The girl took a step closer, her smile stretching unnaturally wide. "We want to play. We haven't had a friend in so long." My throat tightened. I backed up slowly, my hands instinctively finding the trunk behind me for support. "I can't stay. I need to go. Stay with us forever. It's so much fun." Her voice rose, laced with desperation. Then the room shifted. The shadows grew heavier, and the atmosphere thickened. A swarm of smaller figures began to emerge from the darkness, all with those same blank stares. They surrounded me, their expressions shifting as if they were waiting for something. "Join the game." They chanted in unison, their voices harmonizing in a chilling melody that I felt a surge of panic. This wasn't just a game. Something terrible loomed over me, and the memories of those cries I heard earlier crashed back into my mind. Desperate, I turned to flee back down the stairs, but the shadows lunged toward me, blocking my path. Just before I reached the door, I caught a glimpse of the girl, her face now twisted with an unsettling smile. "You can't leave. We want to play." I pushed past her, bolting for the stairs. The weight of their voices pressed against me like a thick fog. In that moment, I realized, I had to face whatever they wanted. Because if I didn't, I might never escape this nightmare. I stumbled down the stairs, heart pounding in my chest. The shadows swirled like phantoms behind me. I could feel their cold breath on my neck, urging me to stop, but I didn't look back. The only direction was down. When I reached the bottom, I slammed into the door at the end of the hallway, expecting it to be locked too. With trembling hands, I twisted the doorknob. To my surprise, it clicked open. I pushed through, stumbling into an unfamiliar corridor that hummed with a strange energy. I took a moment to breathe, slowly regaining some composure. Glancing around, it was eerily quiet. The wallpaper peeled away in strands, and the floor creaked with age beneath my feet. I could feel the weight of eyes on me, even if I couldn't see anyone. Moving cautiously, I explored the narrow hallway. Pictures hung crookedly on the walls, each frame encasing the familiar faces of children. They smiled innocently, yet there was something unsettling about their expressions. Their eyes followed me as I passed, filled with a yearning that twisted my stomach. Suddenly, a soft laughter echoed from a room further down the hall. My instincts screamed at me to run, but curiosity flared. I turned toward the sound. The door was partially open, and as I crept closer, a wave of warmth rolled out, clashing with the cold dread inside me. I pushed the door ajar, peering inside. The room was illuminated by a soft glow, and I saw them, more children, gathered around an old table stacked with crayon drawings. They giggled and chattered, their energy infectious, yet my heart sank. This was the game they wanted to play, and I could feel it in my bones. "Come join us," one of them called out, waving a crayon in the air. "We've got so much to show you." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But instead, I stood frozen. Each child looked somehow familiar, their faces blurred like memories half remembered. I was losing track of my thoughts, pulled deeper into their excitement. Then, I noticed something on the table, a drawing that sent chills racing down my arms. It was a picture depicting me, standing in this very room with the same frightened expression. Beneath it, in messy, childlike letters, it read, "Will you play with us?" Panic shot through me, and I took a step back. "No. I'm not playing." My voice broke, the terror clawing at my throat, but their giggles died in an instant. They turned to me in unison, their smiles fading, replaced by hollow expressions. "You already are," they whispered in eerie harmony. The shadows thickened around them, swirling like smoke. I bolted backward, desperate to escape. But a hand gripped my wrist, cold and unyielding. I looked down to see the girl from the attic, her eyes wide and pleading. "Don't leave us. We want to play." With a surge of strength, I jerked away and dashed toward the door. The laughter morphed into wails, echoing through the hall. Just as I reached for the doorknob, everything around me cracked like glass, then everything went dark. I gasped, my eyes flying open in pitch darkness. My heart raced, and it took a moment for me to realize I was lying on the cold floor. The whispers from the children still echoed in my ears, a cruel reminder of where I had just escaped. Pushing myself up, I felt dizzy and disoriented. I blinked, waiting for my eyes to adjust, but nothing changed. The darkness was thick. I fumbled around, my hands brushing against the rough floor, searching for a way to stand. The claustrophobia pressed in on me, making it hard to breathe. Suddenly, a sliver of light broke through the shadows, illuminating a doorway to my left. I crawled toward it, the low sound of water dripping echoing in the silence. The air felt damp, and I could taste the metallic tang of fear on my tongue. I peered through the threshold. The room was dim but alive with movement. Dark shapes flitted just beyond the light, moving like smoke. I felt a pull toward it, an urge to understand. Swallowing hard, I entered the room cautiously. The walls were lined with jars filled with strange, murky liquids. Shadows danced in the depths, and inside each jar, I could see something, faces twisted in terror, mouths open in silent screams. I recoiled, my stomach twisting. These weren't just jars, they were prisons for the lost. A sudden crash from behind made me jump. I turned, heart racing, and saw the door I had just crawled through slam shut on its own. The light flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing there, a silhouette against the glassy surface of the jars. But when I blinked, it was gone. Stay calm, I whispered to myself. I had to think. There had to be a way out. I took a step toward the jars, leaning closer to get a better look. When I saw it, one jar was larger than the rest, bubbling ominously. It stood alone on a pedestal, a faint glow pulsating from within. My gut twisted as I leaned closer. The face trapped inside looked disturbingly familiar. It was my own. I stumbled back in shock, my breath hitching in my throat. How was this possible? This can't be real, I muttered, shaking my head. But my eyes kept drifting back to the jar. Something deep inside me was compelled to understand. I approached once more, drawn to that horrified reflection. Then, a chill filled the room, and the shadows began to dance wildly. Let me out. A voice cried, but it came from the jar, not my own lips. I jumped back, heart pounding, fear gripping me. Someone was trapped in there, begging for life. I can't help you. I yelled, panic rising. I don't know how. Will you play? The voice echoed, now laced with cruel laughter. The others joined in, their sinister giggles wrapping around me like a shroud. A sudden realization hit me. The children from the room must have been here before me. Maybe they were the ones trapped, their spirits lingered with those who had failed their games. I had to get out now. Just as I turned to flee, the jar rattled violently, and the lid began to twist. That was the moment I knew I wasn't alone. Someone is coming, I breathed, dread flooding my veins as I bolted for the door. But as I reached it, I found it locked tight. The shadows closed in, shapes morphing into a nightmarish swirl of faces. I was about to be trapped like them, and the whispers grew louder, drowning out my screams. I pressed my back against the cold door, heart hammering in my chest. The dark figures writhed closer, their haunting giggles echoing in my ears like a macabre lullaby. I felt a sharp pang of desperation. I had to escape. I turned to look for another way out. My eyes scanned the room frantically, but all I could see were the jars, their reflections flickering with ghostly faces. The larger jar pulsed erratically, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me. I took a breath, steadying myself as I inched away from the door. As I paced around the room, I noticed a small gap in the wall beside the jars. It looked like a narrow crawl space, just big enough for me to squeeze through if I could manage it. Maybe that leads to another room, I thought desperately, hoping for a chance to escape. I knelt beside it and felt the cool moisture in the air creep up my skin. I glanced backward, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure flit past the light. My pulse quickened. I didn't want to imagine what would happen if I stayed here. Taking a deep breath, I ducked into the crawl space. The darkness enveloped me immediately, and I shuffled forward, my hands scraping against the damp, cold ground. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the whispers that seemed to follow each movement I made. Suddenly, the wall shuddered behind me. I jumped, panic coursing through my veins. The sound of laughter erupted, fewer now, but those that remained sounded closer. I couldn't tell if it was coming from within the crawl space or outside. I didn't dare look back. I kept crawling, pushing myself forward until I felt the narrow space widen into a small chamber. I crawled out, my hands trembling. I blinked against the dim light, but my heart sank as I realized where I was. In front of me stood a familiar sight, a darkened room, nearly identical to the one I had just escaped from, but this one felt even more oppressive. The air was thick with the scent of something rotten. I got to my feet, swaying slightly as I regained my balance, then I saw them. Jars lined the walls here too, each one containing more faces, more twisted expressions of horror and disbelief. I gulped, choking down bile that rose in my throat. The faces, they were different, yet I found myself connecting them to the children I had seen before. "Help us," they whispered, faint and desperate. "It's not safe." My breath hitched. What was happening here? I had to remember that I wasn't just a spectator, I was still in danger. But how could I help them when I didn't even understand what was going on? A noise behind me made my blood run cold. Something was lurking. The shifting shadows didn't relent as I turned. There, at the edge of the dim light, stood the figure I had glimpsed earlier. Its outline was still and foreboding, almost absorbed in the darkness. The whispers grew louder, drowning out my racing thoughts. I couldn't make sense of any of it. My only option was to run again, but I needed to know they needed to tell me how to escape before it was too late. Wait! I called out to the figure. How do I help you? But the laughter returned, sharp and cruel, and I knew that time was running out. The shadows behind me shifted, growing thicker, and in a moment of sheer fear, I bolted toward the door at the far end of the room. It had to lead me somewhere safe or at least away from this nightmare. With each step, I felt the oppressive force of the shadows closing in on me. Let me go! I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat. Then everything went dark. I gasped as light flooded back into my vision. I found myself sprawled on the ground, disoriented. The thick darkness had lifted, but the oppressive smell of decay still lingered in the air. Blinking rapidly, I realized I was in an unfamiliar hallway. The gray walls were cracked and peeling, and flickering light bulbs overhead cast erratic shadows, giving the space a surreal quality that I pushed myself up and scanned the area. To my left, an old wooden door stood slightly ajar. To my right, a staircase led down into murky depths. My heart raced. I had no idea where I was, but something told me I shouldn't linger in one place too long. I froze for a moment, processing my options. I need to keep moving, I whispered to myself, hoping the words would instill some courage. I chose the staircase. Each step creaked ominously as I descended, sending chills down my spine. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and mildew. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes that made my imagination run wild. I could feel someone watching me from below. When I reached the bottom, a narrow corridor opened up before me. The walls were lined with framed photographs, but they were blurred and distorted, faces forgotten in time. I stepped closer to one, squinting to focus, and my breath caught in my throat. A little girl stood in the center, an unsettling smile plastered across her face. The same girl from the jars. My pulse quickened as I backed away, feeling the weight of the dark memories that surrounded her image. Rounding the corner, I stumbled into a room that felt like a tomb. Stale air surrounded me, and an old rocking chair creaked softly by itself, as if someone had just vacated it. What is happening? I muttered, trying to anchor myself in this strange reality. My instinct screamed at me to leave, to escape whatever darkness loomed nearby. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a small doorway, half hidden behind a dusty curtain. It flickered in my periphery, urging me closer. I reached for the curtain, my fingers trembling in anticipation. What lay behind it? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from somewhere deep within the building. I froze, fear coursing through my veins as the sound reverberated, shaking the very ground beneath me. The plush fabric of the curtain felt like a lifeline, but I knew I had to choose that. I carefully pulled the curtain back and pushed through the doorway. It led to a cramped storage room cluttered with boxes and old relics. Dust motes floated in the weak light streaming from a single window. To my left, a dark shadow shifted. My breath caught tightly in my chest. It was a figure, hunched over, rummaging through a pile of boxes. I could barely make out a face, but the wild hair and elongated limbs sent shivers through my body. My limbs felt stiff, as if glued to the floor. Who are you? I managed to croak out, my voice trembling. The figure turned slowly, head tilting at an unnatural angle. A twisted grin spread across its face, and I felt a rush of dread clawing at my gut. I stepped back, ready to bolt, but before I could move, it raised an arm, pointing directly at me. More than you know, it whispered, the words slithering through the air like a snake. And then, without warning, everything fell silent. I stood frozen in the dim light, my heart hammering against my ribs. The figure remained still, its gaze unyielding as if it could reach inside my mind. I felt like a deer caught in headlights, but instinct kicked in. I had to get out. I turned to bolt back through the doorway, but a loud crash echoed again, this time closer, reverberating through the walls. Panic surged in my chest. I couldn't just stand there, paralyzed by fear. I pushed past the curtain and into the hallway, darting down the corridor. The photographs loomed like silent witnesses, their distorted faces watching me flee. I felt their gaze pressing down on me, even as I ran. I could still hear the figure's whisper lingering in the air, a haunting echo that chilled me to the bone. More than you know, it sent shivers down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was right ahead. I spotted a flickering light at the end of the hallway. Hope surged through me. A way out? I hurried towards it, but as I neared, dread crept back in. The door leading to the light was slightly ajar, and oddly enough, I heard soft murmurs coming from within. I hesitated, my breath hitching again. Curiosity battled with fear, but something compelled me to stay close. I pressed my ear against the door. The voices were hushed, almost conspiratorial. The phrase, "She's coming," echoed through the wood, sharp and insistent. My blood ran cold. Who were they talking about? Suddenly, the whispers ceased. My stomach dropped as I realized I might have been heard. I stepped back from the door and glanced around. The corridor felt even darker now, shadows creeping in from every angle. I couldn't turn back, or could I? My instinct screamed for me to leave, to run, but the mystery outweighed my fear. Deciding I couldn't just abandon the door, I slowly pushed it open. The hinges protested with a low creak that pierced the silence. As I stepped inside, the first thing I noticed was the cold, sterile air that enveloped me. The room was empty except for an old table and a few chairs, and against the far wall stood a tall bookshelf lined with dust-covered tomes. Intrigued, I crossed the room carefully. My fingers brushed the spines of the books, the titles a collection of strange symbols and forgotten lore. It was then, out of the corner of my eye, that I spotted movement on the far side of the bookshelf. A shadow flickered briefly before disappearing behind the row of ancient books. I felt my heart skip. Something or someone was in here with me. I turned, scanning the area for any sign of life, but the room remained silent. I stepped backward, unease knotting tightly in my stomach. Then, without warning, the door slammed shut behind me. I jumped, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I rushed to the door. It wouldn't budge. Panic set in more than ever. I pounded on the wood, shouting for help, but the only response was my voice echoing back to me. When I heard it again, the soft murmur, closer now, as if the shadows themselves were coming to life. "She's here." My heartbeat quickened as I spun around. Whatever was hidden in that room wasn't finished with me yet. The air was thick with tension as I turned to face the bookshelf. My heart raced, and I could feel dread coiling around my chest like a vice. The whispers grew louder, echoing off the walls. "She's here. She's here." I had to think. Trapped in an old storage room with the door locked and the oppressive energy closing in, my survival instinct kicked into high gear. There had to be a way out, and the whispers urged me to open my mind to what lay beyond the shelves. I stepped closer to the towering structure, scanning the spines of the books. I felt drawn to a peculiar volume, its cover worn and the title long obscured by dust. My fingers tingled just before I grasped it, and the instant I did, a violent shudder vibrated through the room. The whispers surged with renewed intensity. "What do you want?" I shouted into the dark, summoning every ounce of courage. "Why are you keeping me here?" Silence enveloped me, thick and tangible. Then, from behind the shelf, I heard a soft giggle followed by a series of knocking sounds against the wood. Suddenly, one of the bookshelf panels gave way, and a narrow door swung open a hidden passage. The murmurs escalated into frantic chatter as I glimpsed shadowy figures darting in and out of sight. I wasted no time. Without thinking, I dashed through the opening, my heart pounding in rhythm with the chaos behind me. The passage was snug and dark, each breath tasting of moisture and mold. I crawled forward, propelled by an urgent need to escape. The whispers faded, but my heart still felt the lingering shadows reaching for me. As the narrow crawlspace opened up into a larger room, I gasped, finally able to draw in a breath that didn't feel thick with dread. The room was lit in flickering candlelight, revealing hundreds of notes pinned to a vast wooden board along one wall. Dread washed over me anew as I recognized the pictures, the same children I had seen earlier, their expressions twisted in silent screams. "Why?" I muttered, my voice trembling as I stepped closer. Shadows flickered around me, flickering under the dim light. Hints of laughter echoed, but not the innocent kind. I could feel the malice that thrummed just below the surface. A grim realization settled in: this place was both a sanctuary and a prison. The children, lost in their games, had never been freed, and then I saw it, the final note pinned at eye level, scrawled wildly, "Join us for all eternity." My breath caught in my throat, a wave of terror flooding my senses. There was still no clear answer about their intentions, and I had no interest in being trapped among the echoes of all the lost children. I took a step back, anxiety crawling up my spine. I turned, ready to find a way out, but to my horror, the doorway I had entered was gone, sealed as if it had never existed. The crowding shadows snapped around me like hungry vipers. The laughter crescendoed into a wild storm, each voice ringing with despair, and in that chaotic moment, I felt a clutch on my wrist. "Stay with us forever." A small, cold hand gripped my arm. It was the girl from the attic, her grin wide and unsettling. Panic surged, my heart raced as I pulled away, searching frantically for an exit. "Let me go!" I shouted, scrambling backward, terror coursing through my veins. In a split second of recklessness, I lunged toward the far wall, aiming for a rickety ladder that led to a window high above. I clambered up, ignoring the protests of the shadows swirling below, their voices howling and pleading. My hands shook as I grasped the edge of the window frame and swung my legs over, the cool night air hitting me like a slap. I squeezed through the window and fell onto the damp earth outside. Scrambling up, I turned only to see that the window had already sealed back, the ominous laughter echoing behind it. I staggered into the night, gasping for air, my heart racing like a runaway train. I was free, but the encounter lingered like a shadow in my mind. I glanced back at the building, each flickering light a whisper of those who remained. Did they still wait for someone to join their game? I bathed in the chilled night air, still unsure whether my escape was a victory or merely a temporary reprieve. As I walked away from that cursed place, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching me from the darkened windows. Whatever it was I had faced, and whether it was real or a twisted product of my own mind, I knew one thing for sure: some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved. I moved to a different city after that. Sometimes, I still wonder about those children and if they still exist, lost and searching for friendship. But mostly, I try not to think about it.